Good morning. Welcome to Coffee Talk. We are your hosts, Southborough Youth and Family Services. My name is Shannon Kniven, and I'm the program coordinator at Youth and Family. And with me this morning is Megan Island, our assistant director. And good morning. And Sarah Castle, our director, who's generally with us, is not today because she is doing a training. So it's just the two of us, and here this morning with us is Dr. Stephen Balsis. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Just fine, thanks.
Good. So we're going to be talking about sleep today, and before we do, let's grab our coffee cups and do a cheers, a toast. Awesome. So, how is everyone this morning?
Awake, alert.
Nice.
Wow.
Good. Well, so we're going to be talking about sleep today and how important it is and all of this stuff. And last week, so Steve and I know each other. So this, this is I'm kind of famous for this for Coffee Talk, that like I am the I know a guy. So, Sarah was making fun of me a few weeks ago and said, what if we wanted a clown for the show? And I was like, yeah, I know a clown. So, So you had a barbecue at your house last week, Steve.
Yeah, we're out by the fire pit as often as we can get out there. So
that is
right.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who was over. I remember you stumbled by, and that was nice.
Yeah, you had graduate students at the house.
Oh, right. Students from UMass Lowell, right?
Yes.
And they were studying at UMass Lowell. They came all the way from Europe, actually. I think all of them. No, one was from Asia. Yeah.
Awesome. And that night we had Turkish coffee, and we're told that there was not a lot of caffeine in it because it was mastic coffee and that it's in a small cup. So we didn't have to worry about not sleeping, ironically. And then I started my workday at 1 a.m. because I could not sleep. So, without even getting into the sleep conversation, probably my tip is don't drink coffee at night.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think my cup had like granules in it that I was chewing. So that might have been the problem. Might not have been filtered.
Right. No, like that's a Turkish coffee thing.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. You make it, it's almost like cocoa.
Right.
And then the grounds, which are like they're powdery, go to the bottom.
Right.
And then when you're done with your cup, you flip it into your saucer, and then you can read fortunes from it.
That's right. It becomes like a Rorschach. So we're talking projectives that night. Right.
Yep. So could have flipped my cup and it would have said, you're not going to sleep tonight. So.
For clarification purposes.
Yes.
Is there a lot of caffeine in Turkish coffee? Because it certainly sounds like it. Okay.
Yes, because that was the other thing. I Googled that and I was like, is there a lot of caffeine? And they were like, oh, Google was like, oh yeah. So
you were misinformed. Okay.
I had my regular night's sleep. I was up for hours. I'm always up. I have sleep maintenance and insomnia where you can't maintain sleep in the middle of the night. But I actually embrace it. I love it. It's my favorite part of the day. I'm up all by myself. Yeah.
Yep. No, I'm in bed by like 9, I think. And if I'm not sleeping, I'm reading. So, yeah. So if you've watched the show before, you know that the three of us are constantly talking about like the building blocks of good mental health. And those are exercise, nutrition, and sleep. And the reason that we talk about those things is that they are pretty easily maintained. So actually, Megan, why do we do that? Why are those the things that we?
Well, because I think those are important because it's good to start there when we're talking about mental health challenges, is because those are things that you can look at first when we're meeting with anyone. That's something that we look at and talk about first is how are you eating? How are you sleeping? Are you getting exercise? Because those are good places to start where you can make quick-ish improvements and even just starting with one of them, and you can start to improve how you're feeling by making changes with one of those areas. And we really strongly feel that those, like Shannon was saying, are like the foundations, the building blocks. So we like to talk to clients, talk to new people coming in about how you're doing in those areas first, and try to make changes there, because those are areas that are key for anyone's mental health and really just overall well-being.
Right. But what we're finding is that talking to clients, sleep has been a pretty significant issue lately. And it's been something that's crossing the lifespan. That before we started recording, I was talking about my 10-year-old. He's not sleeping. We're talking to people who are in their 70s, older. They're not sleeping. So some of that is just, it's sleep is one of the harder ones, and the pandemic on top of that. So we're going to talk about some different things. And so Dr. Stephen Balsis is here today. He is a professor from UMass Lowell. In his research has focused on advanced quantitative techniques to improve assessment and understanding clinical disorders. And he also worked for a number of years at tell me if this is right, Steve, for a number of years at the Sleep Research Lab at Brown University.
Yep.
So tell us more about you.
Okay, yeah, well, so I think you captured a good part of it. My training is in clinical psychology. I fell in love with that about 25 years ago when I was working at the sleep lab and when I was an undergraduate in Worcester. And so then I pursued that, and I went on to study in St. Louis and get my doctorate degree. And then I eventually, so in clinical psychology is the type of psychology where people learn about and learn to treat and assess individuals who are having mental health problems or challenges. And so I've studied that and worked with patients over the years. In Missouri, in Texas, and now back in New England. And so the last few years I've been back in New England, and it's been it's been a very fruitful part of my career. I think the other aspects were as well. I can tell you that, so now I'm teaching undergrads. I teach a few classes regularly, intro, abnormal, and a seminar in clinical psychology. And when the topic of sleep comes up, students are extremely interested. So they're just thrilled to learn about it. And it seems to be something that it just catches everybody's interest. And as you were talking, it makes sense, Megan, that your interventions are partially in the realm of sleep because so much comes together in sleep. And your interventions can be very potent in all those areas, exercise, diet, sleep. There's just so much that happens. There's so many systems that are at play, and so problems will often show up in sleep, and then they can be addressed that way too. So that makes a lot of sense to me that you're working those angles first. So good for you. Yeah, and so that's a little bit about me.
So speaking of sleep, and why is it so important?
Well, so I was thinking about that this morning, and I ran a quick calculation about how much of my life I've spent sleeping to this point. And so if I take all my sleep bouts and approximate them and put them back to back, I have slept for almost 15 years straight. And then I ran the calculation. So if you live like to a ripe old age of 90 or so, you will wind up sleeping for about 25 to 30 years straight of your life. So it's just a huge amount of our life right? It's a huge amount of our life. And for a lot of people, it's sort of mysterious. But so we sleep. I mean, that's a fastball right down the middle of the plate, but we sleep because we need to sleep. If we don't sleep, we in the short term will become irritable and sad and moody, and we'll have a hard time remembering things. It'll be really hard to learn things. If that goes on and on, you'll become more susceptible to diseases and even cancer and heart disease and stroke. And if that continues on, eventually it looks as though you'll die too if you don't sleep. So, I mean, sleep is something that is critically important to health, both body health and also cognitive health or brain health. And so, really, we sleep because we have to sleep, and it's important for our immune system. It's important for our health. It's important for our mood. It's important for our thinking, and so it affects all these really important and helps us maintain all these important parts of ourselves. So, yeah.
So speaking of our brains, if we don't sleep enough, what biologically is going on if we're not sleeping enough?
Well, it's a great question. So if we don't sleep enough, so sleep is part of sleep is reparative for the body, and part of it is reparative for the brain, right? And so if we don't sleep enough, like for example, if your immune system is compromised, so similarly, like kind of the flip side of the same coin, you'll be more likely to have disease. Remember that sleep biologically, if you think about it, if you watch somebody sleep, oftentimes they're very calm, body temperature decreases, they're relaxed, right? So they're not completely inactive if you watch them, but they're a lot less active than when they're awake. Blood pressure decreases. So it's a little bit of a Zen moment, or can be, for you to calm your body down. And so it's if you don't have that experience, even in short time, your risk of stroke goes up, your risk of heart disease goes up, or your risk of a heart attack goes up quite substantially. Even with just one night, not that you would have a stroke, but your risk of it would increase dramatically. Other things that happen in your brain, it seems as though your brain, when you're sleeping, it kind of during the day, it kind of accumulates kind of like trash or garbage, and in the form of proteins and other forms as well. And you have a system that kind of when you sleep, it kind of cleans that out. So it kind of cleans out and helps the body and muscles repair, but it also helps your brain kind of reset for the next day, and it allows you to become alert and feel strong so that you can face the next day. And so, and if you don't have it, that buildup keeps happening, and it will kind of reduce your bandwidth, is the best way I can put it, such that even with like 19 or 20 hours of wakefulness, your bandwidth is reduced to the point where if we put you in a driving simulator, you would look like somebody who was just legally drunk. So in terms of your attention processes and your ability to pay attention to the road and cues, you look kind of like exactly like you're right at their legal limit for drinking. So then if you push that beyond 19 or 20 hours, you look worse than the legal limit for drinking. And so it's really hard to take in information, etc., at that point. So those are some things that are happening when you're sleeping. And so those are also some of the needs that you have, like, for example, your reaction time would be decreased. Your attention processes would be compromised. Your ability for self-control is compromised. There are other interesting things that happen too. Like, for example, people make less moral. They're more likely to act, quote unquote, immorally when they're compromised, like take a shortcut or lie or cheat or something like this. So it's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, it's actually a lot like substance use.
Yeah, it mimics that in some ways, and if you put people again, it's been tested in a number of ways, but in terms of like reaction time or reaction time tests or tests of sustained attention or vigilance or driving simulation. And there's probably many more tests out there where people look kind of similar to people.
Right. Or even just like you're saying, decision making and interesting.
Yeah. Not to mention your mood, you can become quite moody and irritable. And then the downstream consequences for that are, maybe you yell at your boss and maybe then they won't want to employ you anymore. And then maybe you'll yell at your kids and then there are consequences downstream for them. And maybe you'll get into a fight with your spouse. And over time, if you're constantly sleep deprived, you can imagine that the consequences for this in your life extend in a number of important life domain directions, right? So it can be quite problematic.
So like Shannon was saying, we've been hearing a lot of people who are saying they're just not getting enough sleep. And from some of them, teens in particular, they're just like, there's no way I can get 8 hours of sleep, but I'm functioning just fine. So I have a two-part question, is there a magic number and does that vary like based on age? But also, can people really just be fine? Can people be just fine just getting a few hours of sleep a night? Is that
right? Yeah. So I think you've hit on some really important things there. So let me take those one piece at a time. Now, in terms of teenagers saying that they don't need a lot of sleep, so let me kind of take that in and think about that relative to the way I kind of conceive of the need for sleep in teenagers. And I don't doubt that people are having that conversation with their teenagers, but here, let me tell you when they're probably not having that conversation. The teenagers probably aren't saying that at 6 a.m. when their alarm goes off, or Saturday morning at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. or 8, 9, 10, noon, 1 p.m. when they're trying to sleep in. But when they're probably having that conversation is 8 p.m., 9 p.m., when the parents want them to go to bed, and the teenagers say, I'm not tired. I don't need to go to bed. I'm not tired. That's probably when that conversation's happening. And so it turns out that there's kind of two forces at play that are giving rise to that phenomenon in the teenage years. And I think that it eventually, I think that this leads to those really grumpy teenage years in part. Like people, they're just so sleep deprived that they're miserable and grumpy. And so here, let me just explain for a second. So you have in your body a circadian rhythm. And during the teenage years, your circadian rhythm is such that so during a typical day, your circadian rhythm is usually like, let's just say high during the morning and, most of the afternoon and then into the evening, and then it begins to dip down. And as it dips down, you get tired, and that's when you kind of go to sleep, and it kind of dives down throughout the evening, and then usually starts to sort of build up early in the morning, and then you wake up. And for teenagers, their circadian rhythm, they're very sensitive to light cues and time cues during the day, and their circadian rhythm constantly gets reset such that their circadian rhythm is telling them to stay awake at night. So they're quite awake, especially if they're on their iPhones or computers. And plus, if they were outside all day, their brain is receiving these light cues and their circadian rhythm is getting pushed such that they really aren't sleepy at 10 at night or 11 at night or midnight or even 1 p.m. When I was in college, I used to go to bed at like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. sometimes. But especially like starting at like 14, 15 years old, your circadian rhythm it's telling you, stay up, you're alert, you're awake. And so they really can't go to bed. It's really hard to go to bed at 8 p.m. But what happens on the other side of things is they have school, so they have to get up at 6 a.m. or 6:30. Right. I see my son walking down to the bus sometimes in the pitch black, dark, right? And so then they're not getting enough sleep. So they might be going to bed at, let's say, 1 a.m., but they got to wake up at 6 a.m. So that's 5 hours of sleep. So they're building up a sleep debt, right? So they build up this sleep debt every day. And then on the weekend, you'll notice that they'll pay off the sleep debt. So they'll actually want to sleep in on Saturday. They don't want to be woken up at 8. They want to sleep at 9, 10, 11, 12. My son will sleep until noon if we let him, for sure, right? And so because he builds up this sleep debt during the week. And so that's the process at play. And I think that makes kids a bit miserable. And this is one of the arguments for moving the school start times back. And there are these biological forces at play. So you have the biological forces that are forcing them to stay up, and then you have these daily forces that are, or their daily schedule telling them to kind of they have to wake up, and it creates this issue for them. So I think that the people who are having that conversation with their teenagers in general are probably having that conversation at night. Oh, you should just go to bed early, but they can't go to bed early because their body's telling them to stay up. So now I think another part of the question was, is there a magic number? So if they're only getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep, that's really not enough sleep. They probably need a lot more than that. They probably need, 8+ hours of sleep. Now, is there a magic number? It really depends. There are some studies that point to, quote unquote, a magic number of about like 8.25 hours of sleep. But what we know for sure is that people who are different ages sleep a different amount. So for example, people who are very young will sleep about 16 hours a day. So like a neonate or a very, very young infant might sleep for about 16 hours a day. Yeah. And then when you're about, and that kind of decreases throughout your life. And like when you're about 5 years old, maybe you're only sleeping about 12 hours a day. And then 14 years old, maybe 9 hours a day or so. And that decreases in middle age, maybe 30 to 50, you're looking at sleeping, between 7 and 6 hours a day is typical. 6 to 7 to 8 hours a day. 7 to 8 is better. And then as you get older, like 50 to 90 years old, you might only be sleeping 5 or 6 hours a day. And it does seem that it's harder for older people to get more sleep than that. So the sort of magic number kind of changes with age. But in general, people talk about trying to get about 8 hours of sleep or 8+. And if you have a young teenager getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep, that can become problematic in a number of ways, but it's tricky to solve that problem, right? Because it's very challenging for the reasons that I talked about. I'm trying to think if there was another part to your question that I might have missed, or
I think you covered it.
Yeah. So those are some relevant issues there, I think.
So a question, this is a curveball question for you, but as we were talking about, as you get older, your need for sleep kind of decreases. And that's another place that we see, it's like bookends of sleep issues, right? We see it a lot in our teens, and then we see it in folks that are like, 60+. So any thoughts on what's going on as you're getting older, that it's like, okay, I'm sleeping like, not me personally, but I'm just saying, we'll talk to some seniors who are like, I'm sleeping like 3 hours a night, or I wake up 50 times during the night, or, what's happening on that end.
Yeah, so there's sort of two issues there. And so one issue is kind of what's happening, but I think probably more useful to think about is what can you do about it, and how can you find out what's the right amount of sleep for you. And so one way to do this is to what's happening in general, it's that you're getting older and it's harder to sleep, and your sleep isn't as deep as it was when you were a kid. Like kids will sleepwalk when they're young. They're literally asleep walking around the house. They might even leave the house, sleep talk. You don't see older people sleepwalking because their sleep isn't that deep. It doesn't allow them to sleepwalk. They get up with just even a small noise in the room or small stimulation. But I think what's equally as important is how they can handle it. And so one way to handle it is to try to restrict the amount of time that you spend in bed to start. So you might say, okay, well, if I only sleep 3 hours a night, I mean, that's maybe an extreme case, but then just restrict your sleep time in bed to 2.5 hours. Okay, I can only be in bed from midnight to 2:30. Now, this is kind of an extreme case. And then once you're filling that whole space with sleep, right? Then march out the bedtime and the start time. So okay, so now I'll go to bed at 11:30 and wake up at 3. So now it's 3.5 hours, and then so you can consolidate your sleep. So instead of getting 3 hours of sleep or 4 or 5 or 6 hours of sleep um, in multiple small bits, you can consolidate your sleep into one big sleep bout, wake up and spend your whole day doing activities, and you just kind of march that out until things kind of get discombobulated again. And when they get discombobulated, okay, well, that's probably about how much sleep you need to function. So if it's 5 hours, well, now you have a 5-hour window. You're getting all the sleep you need, and you can spend your whole day doing activities, having fun, wearing yourself out, exercising. And then when that 5-hour window comes again, now you're sleeping. And now if you start filling that whole 5-hour window and you still feel a little tired the next day, move it out 15 minutes, give yourself another 15 minutes, and you can kind of start marching out those boundaries. And so that's one thing that you can do. If you think that you're not getting enough sleep, because sometimes what will happen is people will sit in bed and they'll sit for, they'll go to bed at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. and they'll get up at 4 a.m. But now it's been, 8 hours to get 3 hours of sleep. They're sitting in bed. And so that can be worrisome for people, and it can be kind of wasted time as well.
Any other thoughts on things that people can be doing to have better sleep?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So there's something called sleep hygiene. And so I like to think about it in 3 kind of areas, right? And so I have it pulled up here. Getting the right personal habits, focusing on your sleeping environment, and then having a routine, getting ready for bed. So in terms of personal habits, here are some things. You can fix a bedtime and fix an awake time, a little bit of what I was talking about. Try to avoid napping. You don't want to drink alcohol or caffeine 4 to 6 hours before bed, right? It's something that I'm guilty of. You want to avoid heavy or spicy or sugary foods too. And if you exercise regularly, but not right before bed, but if you exercise regularly earlier in the day, that actually will warm up your body and warm up your brain. And it's that's what actually makes you sleepy. So those are some good personal habits. Your sleeping environment, you want a comfortable bed, obviously, and not everybody can afford that or has a comfortable bed, but that can be very helpful to have a comfortable bed. You want the right temperature. You want to black out all distracting noise, and even if you have like an Alexa, maybe you can turn it on white noise, and that'll kind of drown out sounds. I know where I am. Sometimes there's a rooster crowing or some dog barking, and so or there's noise from other family members, and so that can be very helpful. You can black out the light, and then you also want to reserve the bed for sleep. So you don't want to use it as an office, a recreation room, a TV center, watching Netflix and all these other things. But if you just train yourself, the bed is for sleep. That can be very helpful. So in terms of your sleep environment, those are some tips. And then in terms of a routine or getting ready for bed, you want to work yourself through the same routine and kind of teach yourself, well, this is what I do as I get ready for bed. You might have a routine like having a warm bath or brushing your teeth or reading right before bed. You might do some relaxation right before bed, some deep breathing. You want to have some comfortable clothes on, get in a comfortable sleeping position. And you really want to leave your worries behind. If you find yourself worrying and you can't sleep, it's better to get up, move to another room. Don't go doing a lot of exercise, but just quietly maybe read a book. What you don't want to do is turn on your phone and shine the light of the phone or a computer into your eyes, because that will wake you up. That will interfere with your ability to sleep. So across those 3 categories, in terms of personal habits and sleeping environment, and then your routine, we call that good sleep hygiene. So you can practice good sleep hygiene. And if it'll kind of prepare you for the next day. You'll sleep better and you'll feel stronger. You'll be able to face the tasks the next day, and it'll help you accomplish goals, be focused, learn material. You'll do better in class. You'll actually be a better, more wholesome, more easily digestible, palatable person to the people in your home and your environment. So it can really have an effect, not just for you, but you can also be doing it for the others around you as well.
Awesome. Well, we're out of time. We have like 100 more questions to ask you, so we're going to have you come back on another episode so that we can talk some more about this. But thank you. So this was
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on,
Yeah,
Dr.
thanks for having
Balsis.
It's an episode we share with a lot of people.
Yes.
Like Shannon said, this is something we talk to a lot of the people we work with. Sleep is a huge issue that a lot of people we know struggle with. So thank you.
Yep. Well, it's going to be 30 years of your life. So if you're lucky enough to live long.
Yeah. So we want to get it figured out.
Yeah, let's make it count. So next week we have a special time for Coffee Talk. We're going to be actually on at 3:30 in the afternoon instead of our usual time, and we're going to be introducing the winner of our Lori Sugarman Whittier Wellness Award. That's a lot of W's, and that is local artist and volunteer extraordinaire Chelsea Bradway. So please join us next Tuesday at what time did I say? 3:30. And we'll be here, and we hope you are too. So thanks and have a great day.